Rinamold to come and take over the session. Pleasant afternoon, one and all gathered here. I, Rinamold VU, Assistant Professor, UG Department of Computer Science, take this opportunity to introduce Speaker of this section, Dr. Kieran Fernandes, on the topic Artificial Intelligence and Gamification in Business and Society. Professor Kieran Fernandes is Associate Dean for Internationalisation since 2017, having served as the Head of Department and Professor of Operations Management from 2013 to 2017. Professor Fernandes is also the Executive Director of the NELP Innovation Observatory, Fellow of University College, Durham, England, and the Woodson Research Institute. He held academic positions at the Universities of Warwick and York and is a professor invited at Emilion, France. He was appointed by the UK Secretary of State for International Development as a non-executive director of the UK National Commission for UNESCO with a special responsibility for higher education, and in 2017 was elected Vice Chair of the UK NSC. He currently sits on a range of advisory panels covering various aspects of operations and innovation management, Academic Advisory Council member of the Chartered Management Institute, and is member of a variety of editorial boards. Professor Fernandes has a bachelor's degree in production and mechanical engineering, Masters of Science in Industrial Engineering from Mississippi State University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a PhD in Engineering from Warwick University. Before his academic career, he was a subsystems engineer at the NASA's Stennis Space Center, where he was awarded the NASA Space Shuttle Main Engine Continuous Improvement Award for his work on decision-making systems. Professor Fernandes, a fellow chartered engineer, was elected to a fellowship of the Academy of Social Science in 2015. He was awarded the 2015 Caterpillar Faculty Awards for his work on supply chain optimization and the Vice Chancellor's Gold Medal for his work on internationalization. Professor Fernandes was named the Financial Times Professor of the Week for his work on home automation and smart cards. Professor has authored 3 books and contributed chapters to various books in the field of supply chain management and business. His research interests are operations management, innovation diffusion, and complex systems. Professor published more than 50 articles in reputed international journals. He is currently the Associate Dean for the Faculty of Business in Durham University, England. It's a privilege and honor to have Professor Fernandes as speaker for this conference. Once again, we welcome you, sir. I request Professor to enlighten us with your thoughts and take over the section. Dear delegates, to avoid technical glitches, we have the recorded video of the talk. The resource person also available online for any clarifications. Thank you.
Durham is one of the world's great universities with a global reputation for excellence in research, education, and the student.
But we are so much more. The university is so and wonderful.
It buzzes with life and activity and everything else.
It's such a beautiful place to live. I felt very privileged to actually live in Durham.
It has this magnificent history and wealth of story and legend around it.
I arrived here as a young, innocent, enthusiastic, wide-eyed young researcher.
In my case, all the way from London up to Durham, which in those days seemed like a long, long way away.
Everything was new to me, and what I encountered here was a really warm and supportive environment.
I can remember walking under that cathedral, just looking up at it and thinking, this is special.
I think what we provide is a second home. The collegiate system is hugely instrumental in making that work.
When you come to Durham, you get given a college. That place becomes your home for 3 or 4 years.
The collegiate system means you have really strong ties to a body and a group of people who become sometimes your best friends for life.
So the college experience and the residential experience for a student at Durham is central to what you then build upon.
If not unique, it's very rare in British universities, and I think it's pastorally very important.
This intimacy, this sense of security that you aren't just one student among many. And I think that makes it a Durham experience, a very different experience to what you might have at another university.
And that's what we do well. I think we look after our students well, and we leave them with a very big impression when they go from here. To see some of the brilliant work that goes on here, some of the research in particular, it's mind-expanding.
The goal always is to help people become engaged, to thrive intellectually in their character, in their career pursuits through educational development.
We want to make sure that we offer a fantastic education and wider student experience which is amongst the best in the world.
There are so many opportunities to get involved with different things at Durham, inside and outside of college.
I was able to balance many different things and juggle lots of different activities, whether it was sponsorship secretary of the Union Society, taking a play to Edinburgh.
I spent an awful lot of time on Plenary, which is the university newspaper.
Getting involved in opportunities that encouraged me in my leadership abilities translated onto my degree, and I was able to approach my academics with an air of confidence and putting in the skills that I'd learned from those extracurricular things.
I hope the university continues to build on that reputation as a brilliant seat of learning, but also as a place that can enrich people's lives in so many ways.
It's growing. It has to grow. That means, obviously, development, very much to looking forward to the future. It's a very exciting time for the university.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and hello and welcome from Durham to everyone. Can I first of all start by wishing each and every one of you a happy Platinum Jubilee. It's such a great occasion when you get an invitation from a colleague. In this case, specifically want to thank Dr. D'Souza for inviting me to give one of the keynote presentations. And when he said that St. Philomena's College was celebrating its Platinum Jubilee, and he asked me if I was willing and happy to give a keynote presentation, my first answer was yes, of course. For a number of reasons. One, I was born in Mysore a long time ago, even though, I wasn't brought up there. I was born in Mysore. My family lives in Mysore. My grandparents have lived in Mysore, so it's very close to me in my heart. And when I saw this opportunity to talk about some of the work we are doing in Durham and my particular research, I was very happy and really excited to come over in person. Unfortunately, on this occasion, I think we have to rely on technology for this particular presentation. I mean, your logo and motto captures it all. Caritas in Scientia, charity in science. And in many ways, there's similarities in what you wish to do and the sort of things we do in Durham. Just to give you a brief introduction about Durham, for those who are not familiar with where Durham is. So if you look at the map of the UK, it's obviously a train map of the UK. You will see where Durham is, and that's the green circle to the top end of the screen. The red circle is where London is, which most of you will be familiar with. So Durham is one of the northernmost cities in England. The dark line, which you see there, the black dark line, is the border between England and Scotland. So we are a northeast university as far as geography goes, but a university with a very long tradition. The origins of the university go as far as AD 635, when Durham was called the See of Durham. The first Western Gospels, which are called as the Lindisfarne Gospels, were written in Durham. And subsequent to that, it became a seat of learning, a seat of theology, and has operated a school of theology since the very beginning, which operated from 1080, and the university was set up in 1286. And what we call as the modern university has been operating since 1832. It is a university that has focused on developing excellence. And some of the things in the video you've seen is what Durham looks like earlier. But nevertheless, this is how typically most of our buildings are because of the ancient nature of it. What you see on the screen is what is called our cathedral building. Next to that is part of the library. And we also are surrounded next to the building by the castle, which is where some of the tuition takes place. Now, the best way to, perhaps you might have seen Durham, is if you've seen Harry Potter movie, you will have seen Durham University. So this is a scene in Harry Potter where all the students in Hogwarts are seated for dinner at the high table, is where all the tutors are based or academics are based. So this is actually part of the Durham University. You probably have seen Durham University, but not necessarily in the context of perhaps physically visiting. But equally, let me take this opportunity to invite each and every one of you to visit us in Durham University. So before I go into some of the high-level details of the research I've been working on, there was a reason why, from a methodological perspective, I was very keen to pursue this line of research. And really, this idea of working on gamification, which is what predominantly I'm going to talk about, was to understand the limits of traditional analysis. Now, as researchers, you will have come across a lot of debate and conversations about quantitative research, qualitative research. You might have equally come across what we refer as the onion diagram to the top left. And most research will always pursue, if it's a quantitative research, experiments, simulation, surveys, and qualitative research will focus on focus group, case studies, and in the case of mixed methods, perhaps a combination of both. This is the paradigm on which we have always operated. And what I wanted to do was to push the boundaries of this very fundamental notion of research methods and ask the question, are these methods, which we all train to and work on and publish using this method, is this really the limit of what we can when it comes to research methods? And that really was one of my fundamental thinking when I started exploring this whole area of gamification. I have specifically made this presentation to be less technical and more general, because I will assume not everybody in the audience either comes from a technology background or perhaps from a business and management background. Nevertheless, if there are any specific questions, I'm always happy to answer them at the end of this presentation, or even if you wish to drop me an email. So what I predominantly want to talk about is the general trend in technology, and then I want to specifically focus on one particular technology, and that is games and the phenomena of gamification. And finally, I want to end up talking about some of the market trends in this particular space. So when we talk about technology, the one thing to realize is that technology is a heavily evolving phenomenon. What you see on your screen is a diagram which is referred to as the hype cycle. The hype cycle was a concept which was designed by Brian Burke, a good friend of mine who works or used to work at the Gartner company. The idea is a very simple one. There is a fairly robust methodology, which I shall skip. But on an annual basis, this hype cycle comes out. And what it plots on this particular diagram, those who are in the field of innovation will probably realize the standard diagram that is on the screen. And broadly, what the diagram is showing you is there are certain technologies that are on the rise, there are certain technologies that needs to be looked at, and there are certain technologies that are now reaching a state where it's become a fairly straightforward, normal day-to-day use technology. And because this changes on an annual basis, it is important that industry, as well as people who are using technology, understand where a specific technology is when it comes to the innovation framework, or in terms of where the innovation of a particular technology lies. Now, you will look at that. I have tried to break this diagram into two rectangles. The left one is what we classify as forward-looking technology, and to the right, what we have is what we call as productive technology. Forward-looking technology is technology that is primarily an investment from a company which is high risk, but potentially could give them an edge over its competitors. And what you see on the right-hand side is called productive technology, which is a series of technologies companies need to invest in so they can be more productive. At any given point in time, the job of a chief information or chief technology officer has to be what is the balance between a forward-looking and a productive-looking technology. If you put too many eggs into the forward-looking technology, clearly you're taking a high risk, where the returns could be high, but you could also end up in a scenario where a lot of that risk doesn't necessarily manifest itself in terms of value creation for your firm, which probably then implies that you are not necessarily productive. On the other hand, if you're investing predominantly in productive technology, while your company for a short period of time will be more productive than it was previous years, your company will have very little source of creativity to be basically brought into the workplace to be a competitive company or your competition. The reason I highlight these two parts of the technology is because gamification as a technology has always been featuring for the last few years on the forward-looking part of the equation, because it offers a lot of hope when it comes to looking at collecting and analyzing some very important questions that are very difficult to be answered using what I earlier showed you, traditional methods of research, be it qualitative or be it quantitative. Now, this cycle, as I said to you earlier, is evolving and continues to evolve all the time. So if you were looked at 2022 technology hype cycle, it would look slightly different to 2021 and so on and so forth. And equally, the 2023, which is not yet out, will look slightly different to technology 2022. And basically, this is important for you if you're in the technology space to understand. Now, what we have done is we write an annual report in the UK from Durham with our partners, KPMG, where we look at how companies are working at a high level on a number of axes. The axes we particularly talk about, like I said earlier, was one of them is technology. How much are they investing in forward-looking technology, and how much are they investing in productive technology? If you remember the two parts of the diagram, the left hand and the right hand. Now, this gives us a good sense of which companies are investing heavily in both or one or the other. Similarly, we look at this within the context of regions. So Durham University, if you remember my very first slide, we are in the northeast of England. We do not have states as such in the UK, which you have in India, Karnataka state being one of them, Maharashtra state being the other, and so on and so forth. What we have are called as economic zones or economic partnership areas. Durham University, along with other universities, are based in the Northeast economic zone. And our job and the job of the Northeast economic zone is to have an innovation ecosystem which is world-class when it comes to producing, manufacturing, development, R&D of certain skill sets. And what we do on an annual basis is we work with our Northeast enterprise colleagues as a collection of Northeast universities, and we advise them on aspects of policy, aspects of skills, and aspect of operation the Northeast as a region must invest in to make the Northeast one of the most productive areas in the world. So for example, in the Northeast, we focus on 4 clusters. Cluster of advanced manufacturing is one of our clusters. The area of digital innovation is the other one. The healthcare is the third. And then we also have a cluster around oil and gas and energy. So this is what we focus on. We are a small region. So the Northeast of England, as you probably know, the entire UK is about 65 million people. England is about 50 million people. The Northeast is about a few million people in its entirety. So our region, Durham, is about 35,000 people. So it's a very, compared to the numbers you are used to in India, these are very small numbers. But nevertheless, if you look at where we are in the Northeast with that small population, we have large automotive advanced manufacturing companies. If I use the example of the automotive cluster, we have companies like Nissan, Komatsu, Hitachi, Lockheed Martin. We also have companies like Caterpillar, just to name a few of them, with some very high-tech equipment. So if you are using some of the middle-sized Caterpillar equipments for digging and in mines, they probably are made in Durham. If you're using Hitachi trains, they're probably made in Durham. We also, in the healthcare sector, have some of the biggest companies and R&D centers. For example, one you will be familiar with, AstraZeneca, which obviously was one of the first companies to come up with the vaccine for COVID-19. All DNA sequencing for the entire world associated with COVID-19 happens in Darlington. It's about 10 minutes drive from Durham. And the reason why we have a cluster of world-class companies is because this idea of developing an innovation ecosystem in partnership with the universities is an absolute central element of how we work in our region. So let me now start my conversation about slightly starting with the debate about artificial intelligence and then jump into gamification. Now, what is artificial intelligence? Now, this is a term which people have used, and people, when they use the word term AI or artificial intelligence, associate this with, in my view, certain wrong notation of what it is. A robot trying to do something, a robot instructing people in the future on what to do. In the extreme case, cyborgs. However, this is not technically what AI is about. So if you look at AI, it has two dimensions of interaction: human and machine. Therefore, in many literature, you'll actually see the term called human-machine interface. It also has a specific focus on operations or an adaptive focus on operations. So this gives you different dimensions of AI. Human-specific is what is assisted intelligence. So this is really an area of technology that is helping you in performing tasks faster. Machine-specific, this is an area of technology like automation, which is helping you do a number of repetitive manual work that become a routine operation. Adaptive to human is augmented intelligence. This is helping people make better decisions. And then you have the adaptive machine space, which is called autonomous intelligence, which is where decision making is being done without human intervention. The top area, which is predominantly focusing on the specific activities, is also referred as generally artificial intelligence 1 or AI 1, AI paradigm 1, or more specifically, the area of adaptive is referred as AI 2 or artificial intelligence 2. It's really, that's what AI collectively is. It's not one software, it's not one entity. It's different dimensions of how we operate on. For example, on the specific human interface, we have been working very, very closely with some of our colleagues at Dartmouth College in the US. And for those who are history buffs in this space, know that the term artificial intelligence or AI was coined in 1956 in Dartmouth College by John McCarthy. And since then, since 1956, there has always stood an area, a lab of AI at Dartmouth College. They are one of our strategic partners, and Professor V.S. and I have been working for a number of years as partners. So Dartmouth University in the US, Dartmouth College, and Durham University are strategic partners, part of a network that we have been operating together for a good 25, 30 years. So this is something we've been working for some time. So when I talk about human-specific assisted intelligence, now this is something we all, to some degree, use. Most homes have smart technologies on the phone, so you might be already using this to control the temperature, or perhaps in the case in India, the temperature associated with air conditioning, whereas in the UK, we would be using the same technology for controlling the heat. So this is something which we use all the time. Now, the example here which you see is of a company called Hive. Hive is a product from British Telecom. In fact, a company that manufactured this based not far from where we are in Durham right now. And most homes in the UK have this system where you can monitor temperatures, you can monitor energy usage, you can control different rooms, different aspects of the heating through a mobile phone. This is a fairly straightforward technology that's being used and more. And this is an example of assisted intelligence. Cars, other one, so Volvo cars, again, classic example. In Volvo, you would be using a lot of technology in helping you make better decisions, an element of adaptiveness in a way. The other area is of machine and machine-specific activities. Automation, again, a picture you're very familiar with, and many companies use it. Human adaptive system. Now, one of the examples here are where scientists, in particular in the field of oncology consultants, are making better decisions. This happens to be using the IBM Watson Health system, Electa. So again, Watson is a fairly well deployed technology in the UK healthcare sector for oncology treatment. And what it does is it looks at a complex set of data points from an individual, from an individual's family history, and it compares that to a lot of existing research through a fairly complex weave of networks and helps the oncologist come to a better decision on a particular diagnosis. It's again a well-used technology as far as adaptiveness is concerned. And really the challenges now that lie are in the space of machine to machine interaction. That's called autonomous intelligence. And while there are a number of experiments going on, this is again an area where there is a lot of unknowns. How do you know the decision making is correct? What are the ethics underpinning this decision making? And that's an important element to consider. The other question colleagues ask all the time when I talk is, will AI replace jobs? And there's a huge nervousness. And again, this is a myth that has been put forth. Now, what is clear, you will see in a few minutes, is there will be different types of jobs in the future. There's no two ways about it. But let's take a very, very simple business model. The business model is of a taxi driver. What you see is a picture of what is a fairly familiar picture. It's called the London taxis. That particular cab is made by a company called LTI, London Taxi International. It's a company based not far from Durham. And they have that iconic black cab, which is what you would typically see in a taxi rank in the UK. Now, what is the role of technology and what is the different business models associated with things? Now, there are a number of dimensions. For example, when technology is used in this business model, so that model has changed. There are now loads of cars that are not LTI. They are technologies like Uber or equivalent, which you might be using. So what has changed there is the type of technology has changed, the type of driver has changed, the type of car has changed, but the value proposition has remained identical, taking passenger from point A to point B. So the business model that underpins the traditional taxi driver or the business model that underpins Uber. Or in the case of Shanghai, they are now trialing out autonomous taxis with no drivers involved at all. So that has moved from even the model of your Uber, where there was a taxi driver associated with the value proposition. The value proposition has changed from a technology perspective, but the value proposition of the business is still the same. It's still taking passengers A to B. The question really here is, has the business model changed? Well, the value proposition has remained the same. What has changed is the type of value creation in this model has changed. So when people say, will AI replace jobs? The answer is the traditional taxi driver has been changed. Yes, but it has also created a different type of job, a higher skilled job with the use of higher technology in a slightly different way. Now, there are some side effects to it. For example, to pass a London taxi test to be a taxi driver, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years. It's a very complex exam system to be a taxi driver in London. It takes a few days to be an Uber driver. And it probably takes no time for an autonomous vehicle to be a taxi driver. So if I purely use the dimension of ethics, the time the taxi driver passes the test in London, they would have to pass a written test, a driving test. They would have a police check clearance certificate to be for every taxi driver. So by the time that individual is a fully licensed taxi driver with a 2-year training under the belt, the standards that they will deliver from an ethical perspective is very high. With an Uber driver, that isn't the case. And it's definitely not the case when it comes to autonomous vehicles. So there are some pros and cons, which means there are some questions for businesses to address too. Like I said to you, the model of how businesses have changed, but the proposition remains the same. So this myth that always is portrayed in the media that AI will replace all jobs isn't necessarily true. It replaces certain elements of a business model, not entirely the business model. Nevertheless, the challenge for us as academics, be it in St. Philomena's in Mysore or in Durham, here in England, is in the next 10 years or so. Because our primary job, in addition to research and research-led education, is we are training the minds of tomorrow. And that is a huge responsibility we take. And in the next 10 years, our job is that the sort of 65% or so of jobs that will be existing in 10 years' time are jobs that don't exist. So we don't really know the jobs that will exist in the next 10 years. And we are training students to use technologies that haven't been invented yet. And we are training our students to solve problems we still don't believe are problems yet. And this is a huge challenge when it comes to training the minds of tomorrow. What are we training them for? We're training them for jobs that don't exist, using technologies that haven't been invented yet, and their job will be to solve problems we still don't think are problems yet. That's a huge responsibility. So we need to be looking at as far-fetched horizons as we can to understand, see patterns, what we think are technologies that we need to focus on, which is why that curve, which I talked about, is crucial. With that brief introduction, let me straight jump into why are games important. Like I said to you earlier, there are 2 dimensions to why I argue games are important. Games are a great way to solve big problems in a global economy. And I'll define what both big problems and global economy means. If you look at the game as a sector, a business sector, the annual turnover of the game sector globally is a $3 trillion business. Just to get you a sense of what $3 trillion looks like, It's roughly the size of the GDP of some of these countries. That is the total wealth created by the game sector in the world. Just in the UK, our game sectors contribute about 102 billion US dollars a year to the British economy. That's again equivalent to GDPs of some of the countries in the Middle East. And this is on an annual basis. So when we use the word games, this is a serious business sector. In fact, the sector, it is as a GDP contribution, all the examples I mentioned to you earlier, the manufacturing process, it's bigger than those sectors. So who plays games? And it's a serious business now. So not far from Durham, for example, we have a fort, it's called Winchester Fort. If you ever come to Durham, you must definitely take time to go. Winchester is used to be a Roman town. As you know, the Romans were in England, and they have been in England, obviously, in the BC period, and they continue to be in the UK for quite some time. And these are some of the old Roman forts that exist in Winchester. You can see archaeologists digging and trying to excavate some of the areas. And the University in Durham Archaeology Department is heavily involved in some of this work. One of the things that was found and is recorded, as you can see, many interesting artifacts in Winchester, was this artifact, an old Roman game. Games of this sort have been played clearly for a very long time, thousands of years. Maybe these are games you are not familiar with, or I am not familiar with. Perhaps some of the colleagues in the slightly older category will be familiar with some of the games. These are board games, which perhaps you played as kids. Some of the younger ones might have played games of this nature on DVDs. Some of the much more younger ones are perhaps more used to playing games on your mobile phone. Games have existed for a very long time. Why have they existed? A very one simple reason: it's fun. There is only one criteria for a game to be successful. Is it fun? If it is fun, there's a market for it. Not all games have high graphics. Not all games have great features, but still, millions of people play these games around the world. Why? Because it's fun. And this is called the X factor in games development. Is the game fun? Now, if I ask you a question, if I was in person there, do you play games? I would suspect many of you would say, no. I don't play games. I've got other important things to do in life than play games. Well, let me challenge that. If you have ever done any of these things on your computer, capture or recapture, you have played a game. Unknowingly, you have played a game. So these are examples of games adopted by Google or many other companies. Just to give one example of what these do. So if I look at this, what you have are two words. One is called a control word, one is called a flagged word. Control word is a word that the system knows is the right word. Flagged word is the word the system still doesn't know what it is. And what you do is you type in that two words, in this case, triste modern day. And based on what you type, the system either accepts that recapture or not. And in this case, this whole mechanism is fed back to do a number of interesting things behind the scene. It's taking all the words you are physically typing to convert physical documents into a digital format. So the entire New York Times, hard copies, one word at a time, has been digitized by you and me over a period of time to convert it into a digital format. Books from 1851 to present date on Google Books have been entirely digitized by you and me for free using capture and recapture. Every image on Google to literally now getting down to the pixel level. In the picture, you probably say this is where the camera is, or this is where the horse is or cat is, and what type of horse, and so on and so forth. Every image is being labeled, relabeled, and relabeled on a daily basis by tens of millions of us using this recapture model. And the reason some of these things are very popular is because they made it in a game-like format. This is the Empire State Building in New York. It took 7 million human hours to build and was once upon a time one of the biggest projects on Earth. The Panama Canal, which is the second project I listed there, one of the biggest projects on Earth, 20 million human hours of effort. This is human effort gone into creating huge infrastructures. Now let me compare this to what happens online. If you look at Dungeon Fighter, it's an online game. So multiple players are playing this game at any given point in time. On this game, you have on an average 144 million human hours a day of human effort. That equates to 52.5 billion human hours a year. Effectively, that human computational power in that game of about 5 hours effort potentially could have built the two projects above in 5 hours as a human computational effort. So what you have access to is huge human computational power in games, of which one is entertainment, clearly, which is why these companies are doing so well. I think it's a good example. The question really is, what can we do with these games? And are they just fun? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but for those who are slightly skeptic, just esports, so this is sports on an e-platform, is on the rise. I mean, the rise of this is huge. And in terms of what's happening, it's not just the rise in esports viewership. There are like literally stadiums that you can see here are full of audience seeing players play games for entertainment. I mean, this is, I'm talking about millions, different languages across different platforms. And there's a huge number of live audience that is looking at it as a play. I mean, the last, even during COVID time, 22 finals of League of Legends final games, 46 million viewers live. 21, which was in Iceland, Reykjavik, 74 million people were watching it live. And they had about 10,000 people in a stadium like the one you see there, viewing this as the games were being played live. So this is becoming a serious business. In fact, these are some pictures I took in Manchester, where we have shops now. As you can see, these are game shops, and you have different teams, just like how you would go and play in teams in a gym. These are shops that are basically geared to this new world. So what is gamification? Let me give you some theoretical background to gamification. Basically, what gamification is, you are using games that have been successful or not in a non-entertainment setting. So it's really harnessing two things, the X factor, the fun part, and the human computational element to answer some questions which you are struggling to answer. And what I have tried to push is, can we use this vehicle to push the boundaries of questions which we can't using traditional research methods. That's what we've been working on. Those are particularly keen to do a bit more reading. Like I said to you, Brian Burke, he was the same colleague who was involved with the hype cycle. He's written a book called Gamify. I've written quite a bit if you're interested in it. There's ongoing research in this space on the increase. Different parts are on the grow. In fact, this diagram shows you the number of publications for 2022. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of spread on interest in the area of games and gamification, including in India, quite a bit of work happening in this space. Citations, just for those who are interested, I won't spend time on it. But what is noteworthy is while there's quite a bit of research happening, the use of that research in industrial setting is not as high as it should be. There's clearly an area of growth here. Most of the work, as you will see, is heavily biased towards computer science, as you would expect. And one of the things we have done is we have spent some time in Durham setting up a new research lab, which is called DC Lab, or Digital Creativity Lab. There is a video that goes along with this, which I will basically skip for this particular conversation, because if somebody's particularly interested in what we do in our research labs, I'm very happy to have that conversation. Why does gamification work? So gamification works predominantly because of a fundamental theory called self-determination theory. Self-determination theory comes from a basic argument that there are two types of motivation for an individual: intrinsic, extrinsic, and both of these are needed to shape how we behave as individuals. So there are a few fundamental things we need. We need the need for competence. So when we work in a setting, you feel that if there is an interaction, there's a feedback that tells you that you are competent in your job, you're efficient in your job, you're successful in your job, you get a positive motivation to do that better. And generally the mechanism is feedback. So you know, as in industry or wherever you work, you know, if you're called by your senior managers, they sit with you and they say, look, we looked at the work you've done, you're really efficient, you're really successful, and they give you regular feedback all the time. Your sense of motivation increases and you feel, look, I am a competent individual, I'm a competent leader, and therefore you are getting interested in the job you do to a higher degree than if you didn't have this mechanism. And this is one of the fundamental reasons why games are successful, that they have a lot of these feedback mechanisms through points, through graphs, through feedback, through leaderboards, through a number of mechanisms that give you that sense of attachment that you are a competent individual. And again, we've done some experiments with our psychology colleagues in the labs to in a controlled setting to prove this to be true. The other element is autonomy. Everybody who works in a system feels that they should be given that freedom to think and do a job in a meaningful way. And that sense of autonomy is very crucial. That ability where you feel you can make decisions. You have the freedom to make decisions without interference. But that freedom is giving you some meaningfulness activity at the end of it, is again a huge element in the self-determination theory that motivates people to do a job. And again, games latch onto this concept of autonomy by giving you choices. You can build yourself in a completely different way to who you are. You can create stories, meaningful engagement in how you do it. And that allows that sense of autonomy in a game setting. And again, the experiments we have done show this to be true. And third thing in self-determination theory, which brings about motivation in a workplace or an individual, is this idea of called social relatedness. We are by definition human beings or social animals that like to connect to others in a meaningful way, with a purpose, with a goal, with relevance to what we are collectively trying to achieve. And this sense of working together or social relatedness is something, again, games as a vehicle bring together. It brings that sense of relevance, that goal to bring it together. And again, the experiments we have conducted pretty much relate to this. And some of the work we've done and published sort of gives some sense how high some of these competence, decision-making, task meaningful, social relatedness games bring about in a controlled setting, as opposed to when you don't have this in a setting. So what are the principles of gamification? The principles of gamification are very simple. And I wanted to pick up an example in this audience from cricket, because obviously it's something which everybody's familiar with. So there are a number of actors at high level in gamification. You have a designer, you have a player, you have a spectator, and you're an observer. And there's some interaction between them. A designer in the case of a game of cricket would be the International Cricket Council that sets the rules, the framework, and says these are the rules associated with the game. And then you have a player. People look to the player who follows those rules. There's a control mechanism for the player, and basically people enjoy that particular player or players playing the game. You have then spectators, live spectators. Now, in the case of cricket, you will have a huge number of spectators who are very, very loyal, dedicated supporters. In fact, they will come fully dressed as a cricket player, spend the whole day in the cricket game, or in the case of football, a few hours, dressed in the full football attire, and basically through that huge momentum of energy, influencing how that particular player plays with controls in terms of how they, the chanting, the songs, the positive motivation, the reinforcement. And then you have the observers sitting at home, watching television, nowadays a lot more sophisticated than before, controlling aspects, scoring, grading, etc. And then you have the observer. So you have a number of these actors involved in a game. You have the designer, the player, the spectator, and the observer, all playing a particular role. So when you design a game, you need to have these in some setup. You need to have the design controlling the players and the type of players. You also have the spectators that can influence this subsystem. And you finally have the observers that observe this particular subsystem of influence. And every game has these basic fundamental rules when you design a game. What is the game for? How do you design? What are the controls of this game? How is it that I can maximize what I wish to achieve from this game using different type of players? What is the role of a spectator? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The underpinning theory, as I said to you earlier, is the SDT. But this whole idea of game has also changed the business focus entirely. The idea of outsourcing in the 1990s to offsourcing in the 2000s to now this whole idea of crowdsourcing, where we are using people's pair cycles to create knowledge, to create things. And that's what the games focus on, is that element of crowdsourcing. How can you use people to solve a problem you are struggling to solve using the traditional methods that at one point worked? So what can you do then? So let me give you 3 brief examples. I'll give you one example from business, one example from science, and one from society, just to tell you what we can do. So the first example is something we worked on directly. And again, there are a number of publications in this space for those who are interested. So this is a classical problem in industry which had remained unsolved for quite some time. It's called the multi-generation problem. Multi-generation problem is the simplest way to put it is companies have at any given point a number of products in the marketplace. The question the company always wants to know is, what is the right time for us to launch a new product where we maximize the income from the new product without compromising the sale of a previous product? But this is a very difficult question. The traditional method would have been to use some sales forecast and to use the old sales forecast as a proxy for what the forecast should be for the next few products. Now, this is a huge issue. The reason why this is a huge issue is companies the like of Apple, the turnover of these companies is $1 trillion plus US dollars a year. If you get it wrong, you're talking about $1 trillion of issue here. This is a problem which has remained and had remained unsolved for a very long time. Now, this is not just a simple issue because it's quite a complex issue, because how firms behave in a marketplace is a function of many elements. I won't spend too much time on this particular slide, but colleagues, if anybody from the business school or economics will know some elements of this. What I want to highlight is, for example, like I said to you, this is a big issue. So Apple sells about 216 million units a year to the tune of about $1 trillion US dollars. The challenge for them always is, like any company, or used to be anyway, when do we launch a product? So the simplest way companies used to do is a very simple forecasting method. So if what you see is there are 3 distributions on the screen. So when a product has reached, according to the sales, a particular point in its distribution and has gone beyond that particular peak, you start planning to release the second generation. And as that peak starts waning, you release the third generation and so on and so forth. That's a very simplistic explanation of how innovation diffuses in society. It's never worked, which is why it's always been a problem, an unresolved problem. There are equally number of high-level questions, and I won't speak on each and every one, but I'll just highlight 1 or 2 here. How does innovation diffuse in society? How does technology diffuse in society? What is the role of networking and word of mouth on diffusion? When you buy a product, you talk to your friends. What is the role of that networking? What is the role of that word to mouth? Who are the people who buy these products as soon as it's launched? Do we understand that better? And many more questions. So what we did is we designed the game as a multi-network problem where we looked at an innovation that enters into society and it starts to diffuse in society. I won't spend a lot of time on the game methodology, but we use the same principles of designing the games I talked earlier on design, type of players, etc. Now, if you know, there is an online Second Life platform by Linden Labs. It was created in 2003. It has 170 million accounts. It grows about 350,000 a month in 200 countries. It has live transaction that takes place, about 2.2 million transactions of goods on a daily basis. It has its own US dollar currency equivalent called Linden dollar. You can connect to Bitcoins, all sorts of stuff. It has its economy, its religion, arts, education. It's basically Second Life in the metaverse. In this, you have, like real world, distribution of male, females. Most of the people are in the median age of 48 who are playing, who have this Second Life in that setup. You have shops where you can buy things. Shops like you would see in regular places, earphone shops, shops that sell mobile phone. You can buy a mobile phone, you can do all sorts of things. This is all virtual, by the way, in the virtual world. So we use our engine in a virtual world, and we started to collect data. Now remember the human computational power I talked to you about. So this is giving us data set of 2.2 million people. Now, no traditional survey, no traditional way of qualitative research would have given you that level of detail of what people are buying, how they're buying, what are they buying, and what is the role of, what would happen if I introduce a new product or if I change the attributes of product, etc., etc. There are quite a few things that we found, and I'll highlight one or two things in the interest of time. For example, one, the role of interpersonal communication. So there was a huge reliance on word-to-mouth recommendation. So if you think about the products you have in your hand, you are probably influenced by somebody who has already bought this product, shown you certain features, you are really, really excited about this feature, and then you have decided to go and buy that product. And that's the word-of-mouth recommendation. And that plays a huge role. In fact, it's going to play a much more role in Web3 when you're going to have blockchains that are going to be running these platforms. The second thing which was quite interesting we found was also the links of this to status symbols, but also democratization of innovation. And how a product influences and starts seeping into society is not uniform. So how a particular product will seep into, for example, the Indian marketplace will be very different in dynamics to how it will, for example, do it in the British market space, or, for example, in the African market space or the Australian, and so on and so forth. Other elements are direct and indirect network effects. How users interact with one another in a particular setting and different settings. You are a member of different networks. When you're at work, you have a different social network. When you go to a gym, it's a different network. Perhaps if you're religious and go to church, it's a different network. And then you have your family network. So you are a member of different networks depending on which situation you are in. And all of that has a role to play. And also this whole idea of firm heterogeneity. For example, you as a consumer will always wait to a point where you believe the product you're going to buy will give you the maximum functionality for the lowest possible cost. So you want to have all the features you want, but at the lowest possible cost. And that again has a huge influence on how the product moves in this particular spectrum. So what our key findings was, we designed a mechanism which now tells these companies that are interested, when is the best time to launch a particular product, given a number of factors in different ways, using all the things in terms of networks, democratization, where to launch what product, and what are the features that they should launch at what point in time, in a far better way than using a fairly straightforward forecasting method. It's really using the power of what I talked to you earlier. Everyday people's cycle to inform decisions you wish to make. The other example is of a company, as I said to you, we have Nissan. Nissan Leaf is made literally 10 minutes down from where I am right now. One of the flagship cars they make is called the Nissan Leaf. Nissan Leaf, I don't know if it's launched in India, but it's a car where as soon as you enter the car, what you see is a dashboard similar to what you see on the screen. And at the end of the journey, what it does is based on how you have driven, the route you have taken, the way you have driven the car, it gives you a number of points. The points equate to how you are performing in the region. And on that, it gives you a score and it tells you if you are a bronze, a silver, or a gold medal. And this drives people to say, well, I'm a bronze, I need to be silver, I need to be gold, I need to be platinum. And what it's doing, it's basically making you gamify the whole experience of driving. But in the background, what you are doing unknowingly is you are providing information about the route you have taken, the driving memory you have, the type of way you're driving, the factor associated because of that to the range, etc., where you are speeding, where you're not speeding. So the information is being gathered through that game-like engine for you, which is fun. You want to get a bronze. The gold means you're driving in a very efficient way. You're trying to achieve what you wish to achieve, going from point A to B in the shortest possible time with the maximum reach. All this information is what then Nissan is using to design the next generation of Leaf. The traditional method used to be surveys, talking to people, interviewing people, making them test drive a car, see how they drive a car, retest it. That whole traditional view of trying to understand a complex domain is gone as a result of gamifying an experience, an experiment where you do things. I'll focus on an example in science. Now, many of you are scientists, so you will probably know some of these things here. So this is a virus, which you probably know, called the Mason-Pfizer monkey virus, or also obviously it's called as AIDS, HIV. 33 million people get infected, killing millions on a regular basis. The biggest challenge remained for a very long time, trying to understand how the protein molecules fold. And therefore, there was a huge experiment that was conducted through a project called FoldIt. And FoldIt is this engine online where you basically can do a number of game-like activities. It's a serious game where you can look at a particular protein and then you can start to use some of the features of this game to start unfolding the protein. Now, the example here, the live example, if you go and fold it, you can play. It's of the monkeypox H3 binder design. And as a result of this, what has ended up happening is antivirals were for first time invented for HIV. And that particular paper, which has 76 authors, was published in Nature. You can download the paper from Nature. It's a FoldIt games. Of the 76 authors, I think 72 or 73 were the game players who played the game over a period of time, unfolding different of these protein structures, and the few academics that were involved with it were basically writing the papers. So really, this whole idea of using the human computational power to solve a problem which otherwise are unsolvable is a huge challenge. This is another example, a social project. Now, if you see this in UK, and I'm sure even in India, it basically says there's a camera, I need to slow down. If I don't slow down, basically I'm potentially going to get a fine. So it's a negative symbol that is used to have a driver experience. So this was a project which was in Sweden, where there is the exact opposite logic. And everybody that was driving below the speed limit was captured, as well as people who were going above the speed limits were obviously captured. And on the experiment, this was an experiment with Volvo, where in the end, on a daily basis, the people who were going above the speed limit, the pot of money that was collected from them through fines, there was a daily lottery draw of people who were going below the speed limit, and one lucky winner got a sum of that money that was collected from people who were driving above the speed limit. So all of a sudden, the symbol which was used as a negative effect became a positive effect, where people were saying, look, when I see the symbol, it's actually good to go below the speed limit because there is a possibility of me actually winning something in this setup and experiment. Overall, this reduced the speed limit by almost 6 kilometers per hour on a 30-mile road. That was a great, great outcome as a social experiment of creating a game-like setup. See, there are many things you can do in games. Market trends. One of the reasons I believe the timing is so ideal for gamification is because there are 4 things that have come together in a very unique way. Social media, mobile revolution, big data, variable computing. And I don't think there was ever a time when all of these could come close to one another at the same time. Social media, I don't need to explain to you. Perhaps everybody here in the room is in social media. Mobile revolution, I talked to you about the idea of this mobile phone is that you at the fingertips have access to huge computational power. Big data, there is so much computational analytic tools for free that you can download. It's unbelievable. So, it's almost the whole of the Google app engine is something you can download and work for free. You got Apache Hadoop, you got Apache Spark, you got SQL, BigQuery data sets, you got cloud data flow systems, all literally for free. And if you're a commercial user, for slightly little more than free, but all within your grasp. And you're not just linked to traditional computing. You can get input from large number of devices ranging from watches, ranging from wearable clothing, you name it, and you can get input into the system. And I don't think there's ever been a time where you could do this whole thing in one go. So hopefully my presentation about games, not just for entertainment and fun, but for using it in a serious way to answer some very difficult questions in your own field, be it chemistry or physics or biology, business, economics, is really going to allow you to push the boundaries of the traditional ways of asking questions, be it qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. And I think that's where really the power lies. So like I said, at the start of it, I was excited, and I'm still looking forward to the next time I come to Mysore to come and visit you in person, that you're celebrating a Platinum Jubilee celebration. I wish you all the very best with the celebrations, and I thank you for inviting me to come and give this keynote speech. God bless and thank you. And I look forward to us hopefully not just meeting, but also potentially thinking of a way where there can be some form of collaboration between our universities. That is something that is possible in the next few years. And like I said at the very start, it's absolutely crucial that we as faculty members and academics understand that we have a huge opportunity where we look at what is needed for the future, and we need to ensure that we can ingrain 3 elements in what we do. And I say it's the triple helix of any university, of any college. It's the research, the education, and the student experience. I think it's crucial that we link all of these 3 things together to create a value model of where we work. So finally, thank you everyone. I enjoyed coming over, at least virtually today, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Any questions? Delegates, if you have any questions, you can ask now. Thank you, Professor, for an enlightening and thought-provoking presentation. Your knowledge and expertise really help us to learn and grow. I would like to summarize your presentation. Professor gave insights on gamification, importance of gamification, and the current market trends. Professor highlighted on primary research methods and techniques behind gamification. Sir also emphasized on machine learning and challenges involved with machine learning. On behalf of organizing committee, thank you so much, Professor, for taking time out from your busy schedule and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Reena ma'am. It's time for refreshment. The tea will be served on my left-hand side of the corridor for delegates and the faculty members, and on my right-hand side of the corridor for students. Soon after the tea, there will be paper presentations. The paper presentations will be held in the PG block, postgraduate block, in room number 3, 18, 28, 37, and 38. The room number along with the paper presenter's name is also being pasted near the postgraduate building. Our volunteers will help the paper presenters to find their respective rooms. We wish you all the very best for paper presenters. And the online session with virtual presentations will be held at UG Conference Hall. As we sip the tea, let me also remind you all that we will be back here again at the indoor stadium at 6:30 p.m. for an evening full of color, vibrance, and vigor, as we are all prepared to enthrall you with a cultural extravaganza followed by a dinner. So let us all resume back inside this indoor stadium at 6:30 p.m. Thank you. Now I request paper presenters to have their refreshment and head towards their respective room numbers. I request our volunteers to please help them. Thank you.